All right, we're back, and we did the TEFCA episode last time. We're gonna change up the format. We're gonna do an exam, namely
Yay!
Judge Buchwald's exam, which she gave to two of the leading health tech companies out there today, Particle and Epic. And so, this is a long time coming. This case has been progressing since September 2024. Made it through a motion to dismiss, with some of the claims being knocked out, but the antitrust claim, some of the antitrust claims, and a tortious interference claim making it through to the next phase. However, Buchwald scrunched it and said, hey, discovery is not going to progress in full. Instead, you're just going to prove to me that we can actually figure out what a payer and a provider are, what treatment is, whether there's an actual market here for a payer platform. Because the key assertion from Particle in their claims in terms of antitrust is what is the relevant product market, and the product market asserted is this payer platform that they asserted only Epic and Particle had. That's been going since last September 2025. We're exiting phase one, and there's still a fight, and Particle and Epic are pushing for motion for summary judgment by Epic, pushing for actual full discovery by Particle, and Judge Buchwald has concluded that they're just restating the same things that they did last fall, and she needs a 5-pager from each of them on these key questions with as little industry jargon as possible. And so what do you guys think it means when a federal judge has to ask these tech companies to explain their own products in plain English? What does that say to you?
I mean, I don't know how long the typical litigation process is in healthcare, but pretty clear she doesn't want to be caught in this for another 5 years, and that there's, circular definitions. It just screams of like, can we just call X X and Y Y? And nobody is willing to say, we agree on these, except for we will say treatment is specifically call out this particular clause in HIPAA. Aside from that, let's all just create our own definitions. So you can just hear her frustration. And as somebody who's not involved in this at all, it's pretty funny.
Pryce, what do you think?
I think it's a gentle way, sort of.
It did not feel gentle. This felt very much like everybody shut up and just say what you want to say.
This is a teacher to me. Like, I'm getting a teacher who's like, that's an interesting explanation. Make it an eighth as many words and make it much clearer. And then maybe I'll think that you did a good job.
I'm reading See Me After Class.
Yeah, exactly. Like, which is awesome. Nowadays, with generative LLMs and things like that, everyone can say everything all the time, as many words as they want, as confusing as they want. SAT words are a dime a dozen. But when someone says, I want you to be able to explain this to my mom or something like I know I'm doing a good job of teaching if I can explain a concept from our industry to my mother who doesn't care about our industry. And so I love the idea that it's like, let's distill this. And I want you to say this as plainly as possible, because it's giving a hint of both of you are trying to mask what you actually believe. So now choose your words carefully. And I'm excited to dive in.
Have either of you seen Succession?
A little bit.
There can be 7-minute scenes where there multiple characters are talking about something and there's no way to discern what the hell they're talking about. It is just word buzz salad. Whatever happens with LLMs in the legal profession, I'm getting that Quinn Emanuel lawyers have an opportunity to write on the Succession reboot whenever we're ready.
One, brevity is the soul of wit is now brevity is the soul of liveliness. And Judge Buchwald is internalizing that and hoping that, gets us through here. I'm also just, before we dive in, doubtful, right? The whole case is predicated on them having different opinions about what the product market definition is and being like, hey, please just come to agreement about it. Doesn't seem likely.
So. Well, did she expect agreement, or did she expect them to actually just have to paint with primary colors, and then we're going to see that they're, one is red and one is orange? I guess those probably aren't both primary colors, but they're different, and that's worth seeing.
For sure. Well, they have responded, but before we do that, let's just walk through the questions and talk through it. And so the first question is, what is Particle's definition of the relevant product market? I don't know if anyone has thoughts there.
Well, interesting too, the wording there is what is Particle's definition, but then both Epic and Particle have to answer that.
They've kind of skated all over the court, the rink
Yeah.
with this one. The judge is like, all right, we've already been going for a long time. Let's agree about what the original assertion was, which is wild, to your point.
Yep.
I mean, are
Yeah.
we getting into the definition of a payvider? Because that's where this all collapses into.
Well, that's exactly question 2. How do the parties define payer, payvider, and provider?
Okay, so going back to question 1, in defining what the market is, actually, maybe a question for Brendan, because I don't know how closely I read this. When they list the number of customers that they have, was that at the point of the lawsuit, or is that today? Customers.
Epic backdated their customers, but it's also said that they've progressed in selling their payer platform.
But one takeaway from this is EPP is bigger than I thought it was. If that's backdated, what Particle's definition of the market is doesn't really matter outside of what a payvider is, because that's where this all, to me, kind of fell apart. And I don't know if that's like a law firms because they were forced to speak in plain English, or if we really just want to have this aggressively broad definition of payvider. But I mean, Epic's law firm or lawyers came in strong in expecting what Particle was going to say and just saying like, everybody cannot be a payvider.
Is a payer platform a thing in your guys' mind?
I mean, if we're talking that payments and operations are a separate rail of requests, then like, yes.
Pryce, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I was shaking my head. I'm like,
you can do the queries over the same rails, but like it's outside of the spirit of, well, we're going to get into care quality in a second.
the payer platform as defined, like Epic's answer to number 1 is that facilitates record retrieval at scale. And what this really means is like we can help collect CDA documents, which is clinical document architecture standard. Okay, all of the electronic health records should be able to grab the problems list, the allergies, the medications, the immunizations, some encounter details, hopefully some labs, jam them into a chart summary and exchange these on nationwide networks, right? And that happens in the billions today for the purpose of treating providers, seeing these documents to treat patients. And of course, or maybe not of course, if you didn't know, payers will pay out the wazoo for this type of data. They want to know, of my 100,000 sickest patients, if I could get all of those chart summaries, I'm willing to pay Athena, I'm willing to pay Datavant to go fetch them, and I'm a covered entity, I'm allowed to access these things. They're just not supposed to be doing it over the rails of some of these nationwide networks that say, we only exchange for treatment purposes right now. But that's what they're aggregating so that they can do analytics and say, of my sick patients, how do I make them healthier? How do I spend less money and make them happier, hopefully retain their business or their employer's business? And that's too amorphous of a job to me. Like, it sounds like I just described it simply, but there's 100 different protocols that you could use to communicate those documents. There's 100 different standards that you could use to communicate the same type of data in those documents, even though I was calling out one standard. There's 100 different entities and rails. So to me, this is like, is there a product market? Well, I don't know. Like, would you say there's a hammer product market? Is there a hammer product market, or is there like a heavy metal thing that you whack nails with? Sometimes it's like a hammer. Sometimes it's like more of a mallet. Sometimes it's like you use the butt of your drill if you're in a pinch or something, like you've got an impact drill on your belt. That's what's
right.
happening.
Are they substitutes? And like that, for the question 1, it's like the tough part for Particle is they need to say, okay, these are substitutes, right? There's an Epic payer platform, and the way we're doing it, even though they do it different hows, one's the butt and one's a more fit for purpose tool potentially. Like, they're the same, but at the same time, they need to say it's only the 2 of us. There's not these other things.
That's the hard part to me.
But they're trying, and so their answer for question 1, let's go through it. Particle said payer platforms are software enabling healthcare payers to collaborate with providers in value-based care models, defining features of real-time, bidirectional, at-scale clinical data, plus alerting, analytics, and longitudinal storage. Well,
that's a clearinghouse.
why you squint at, you're like, is that a clearinghouse? Is that a population health tool? Innovation is named in the case. There's a tough look
Yeah,
there. It's also interesting that they're saying VBC so prominently, right? Like that it's VBC is one of the defining characteristics for these payer platforms.
meaning what? There's some aspect of risk bearing and the potential to capitalize by avoiding that risk. Like that's what they're saying there. It's not just for the purposes of processing claims. It's also for the purposes of avoiding future claims.
They say if a payer is taking an active role in improving the healthcare quality of its members, that is their primary angle of attack.
Which is again, like, I don't disagree with what they said about a payer platform. I'm just going to come out and say the same thing is true of a delegated authority who only manages your patients or your members' medication adherence. And it's a completely different type of company. And the same thing is true of an entity who uses telehealth to manage all of your musculoskeletal, members' needs. It's just way too broad, in my opinion.
It's also a bold set of letters to lean on when I don't think that we could get the three of us to agree on what the clear definition of value-based care is. Like this to me felt like we're just creating, we're opening up a different drain for Dino to swirl around for a while, because the three of us will have different definitions. And when we go ask 300 strangers on the street, they're not going to know what it means, but we'll also probably describe it differently as well. Reading VBC and this definition, I was like, oh no.
So question 2, payer, payvider, and provider. What do those mean to you guys?
What? Okay, so provider straightforward, right? We can all get to the same definition of provider, right?
Yeah, I can.
The delivery of care.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
where we're going to end up having to argue is like what happens when United owns Optum or any of these other payers have a care delivery arm. But to me, not a lawyer, somebody put it like a really big warning on this podcast that none of us are lawyers.
I know.
I really struggle with the idea that providers in value-based care arrangements are not typically looking at the long-term risk of that population. They're looking at like a defined period, 90 days after surgery, a year of enrollment or whatever. And for many payers, one of the major things that they're doing is risk pooling across like an enormous population. That is, if they have any function at all, it is that. And so that to me is where I feel pretty confident drawing the line on what's a payer.
Article says a payer is an organization that assumes the financial risk of paying for a patient's healthcare. And to your point, the reason you can do that is through actuarial sciences and grouping a bunch of people together and saying, on average, they'll be this sick, and we're going to have more money than that.
Yeah, but my problem is like that feeds into their use of VPC of like somebody who has an ACO and is accepting a fixed fee for their patients for the year. Yes, they are doing some sort of like risk analysis of whether or not they think they're going to be able to deliver care at a lower cost than that. But it's not at the level of like, what do I think my oncology risk is across 30 million patients? They're not doing the level of modeling to offer a insurance product. That's my assumption, is like there's an order of magnitude different in what those types of risk calculating orgs are doing.
In interest of time, say the responses from Epic and Particle. They agree with, they kind of land in the same spot where payer, financial risk bearer, provider delivers care. And both of them say, well, Payvider, Particle terms is like, oh, this is just semantics. Like, what if instead of Payvider, we said payers engaged in value-based care as the group we're talking about, which is funny because like, then you probably should start by saying that in your opening brief. Because typically it's not great to throw in twists into these like nuanced 5-pager briefs as like, oh, we've been talking about this the whole time. And then Epic is like, we disagree with the use of Payvider as industry jargon. And so which is interesting because I remember that being a term when I was at Epic, or maybe I'm like hallucinating and it's come into vogue since then. It, to me, always has described like Providence before they just got rid of their operating plan. Like that was Payvider.
I like Epic's take. They say Epic does not endorse the term Payvider, which I think I kind of agree. I'm like, I would use the term payvider with you two if I was giving a presentation, or if I was, I don't know, maybe like submitting documents to a judge. I don't think I would say payvider. Is Apple a hardware or software company? Well, it's both. And there are times that they're completely separate, and there are times that they're very intertwined. They're inextricably intertwined.
It is a services company. That's the answer.
Thank you.
Like,
Thank you, Tim Cook.
oh
What's
gosh.
interesting, there's some interesting stuff in the Epic letter that we haven't really seen before. They say, well, when we have a Payvider customer, they may have two instances of Epic, basically, right? Like they're going to have the provider group, Optum, and the payer group, United, are going to have separate instances of Epic. And I wonder if that's true for all Payviders. I thought I remember there being one where it's like a merged instance and just like, UPMC is just on one big old, both insurance and healthcare side, but maybe not. Maybe Epic does segment them in that way and then thus, keep a clean boundary when allowing for certain functions.
That's not a function of technology. It's a function of compliance. These people are not supposed to be allowed to see this data, and that's normal. It's probably smart of them, very calculated. But yeah, I mean, the whole point is being a payer shouldn't allow you access to like Pryce's behavioral health notes, right? Like just because. Yeah, that's going to be like in the weeds of state privacy laws and federal privacy laws and HIPAA and blah blah blah. We don't know enough about that, but very interesting that they create that dichotomy.
Question 3. What percentage of EPP and Signal's customer bases are payers, payviders, and/or providers? So what do we think? Are they selling to payers? Are they selling to providers? Are they selling to payviders? Any guesses on what shook out in these responses?
I mean, Particle said all of their customers at time of suit were payviders of the Signal product, which is also a can of worms I don't want to open with you guys, but on-ramp product names are not something I'm like fluent in the way that I know Spanish when I'm drinking.
Well, Signal's new. Like they added Signal to the mix after they filed the case. Once they filed the case, they were kind of like, okay, we're selling to payers. We're selling Signal to payers.
Yeah.
Prior to them, I think it'd be a little bit more behind the scenes. But Pryce, any guesses?
I guess out of the gate, like none of these are providers. They have to be either payers or payviders, and there's a mix. There's got to be a mix. Like you can't have even up to 3 different customers and be like they're all payviders. I would be like, well, Aetna is a payer. I understand it's owned by CVS Health, but like I think that goes back to Epic's assertion that like payvider is a nice term to use on the fly when you're talking to someone. If we're going to define things, let's define them, black and white. And so to me, yeah, you could call them payviders, you could call them payers, but like there's no way that you can call them exclusively payviders, in my opinion.
So, as you guys sort of predicted, Particle says 100% of payers are for Epic Payer Platform are engaged in VBC, who's Signal, 100% payviders, same market. We're selling the same people. That's Particle's take. Epic said we got 23 payer customers as of the time of the complaint. We have more now, but like we're backdating this thing. And then we also have provider customers. This was a twist because they said
300
Epic,
plus?
yeah, because Epic Payer Platform is on both sides, right? Like you're connecting over Epic Payer Platform to provider customers who must have it installed and set up to participate. They haven't really talked about it from that angle and might, again, give Judge Buchwald some reason to pause and be like, are they the same product? Are they the same users? Is it the alleged market? Is it correct? And it's kind of a smokescreen, I think, from Epic, but it was interesting to see them mention provider users as a wrinkle in this take-home exam. Question 4, we can kind of skip over. What further discovery does Particle need?
All of it.
Right, full merits. Let us get in there and see what we can dig up, because that's the whole point.
And Epic, obviously, they're totally aligned with Particle on that one.
Particle is super jealous of QRIS, because QRIS got moved to Madison and in Wisconsin court by Epic's push. And then because it did, that's a rocket docket. They move very quick. And so they're already doing discovery there, even though even though they're still ruling like motion to dismiss and stuff. And so, I bet you they're squinting like, man, the jurisdiction here, the venue here kind of handicapped them in their case.
To your point, question 4, probably not something for us to, not a whole lot to discuss.
Well, the last thing is Epic had like one sentence. They're like, no further discovery is necessary. What did you think? What did you think they were going to say? Question 5, does a pure payer take an active role in a member health through value-based care?
Yes.
It's a bad question. It's a question that should have been asked as like an addendum. Once we've graded the exams and we have to decide which one of you, if you're both equal, then we'll ask you this question. This is just a derivation of the answer to question 2. I didn't get much from it.
Should a payer be trying to push a provider to do the right thing, patients to do the right thing? Yes, that's distinct in some ways from treatment. That's the crux of the issue, is oversight over care towards the right alternatives, the right care pathways, ownership of financial risk. Does that equate to treatment based on the activities? Like that's what's behind this question. And Particle says yes, payers bear the financial cost. So if they're self-interested to improve health, and that care coordination is treatment enough. And Epic says no, like only providers can conduct treatment. They quote HIPAA very directly, the 2000 privacy rule, and payers can help improve care, but the only provider can provide care. That's their angle, and they try and make the question irrelevant by virtue of that.
And I think that's what, Pryce, you're saying the use of Payvider for people like us is it puts multiple people in a trench coat. But really there are multiple people under there. There's also the definition of payer. Oh, man, there's just too many strings to pull here. But like, why do employers have EAP programs? Sometimes it's they don't think that their TPAs are providing the right types of services. Sometimes it's for retention. So there's all sorts of reasons that an employer can act as they're self-insured, and they may decide to introduce a bunch of services. I don't think that we would consider Google to be a provider because they give their employees free therapy sessions through a third party. Payvider is a bunch of things in a trench coat is the way that I'm going to stick the landing here.
I mean, that's what Epic does say, that, right? They're like, Particle's definition is so broad, it could be anybody. It could be you or me.
Yeah.
So is that right or wrong? It's compelling. It's a compelling argument.
We said that improving health, absolutely. Payers can improve the health of their members. Treat, yeah, it's a little bit more like you should have an MPI, in my opinion. There should be an encounter documented. And then maybe like, don't you have to bill yourself for that or something? I'm assuming there's like all sorts of laws that would have to do with treating.
Money here goes to money there.
Now I'm even thinking like, imagine one of the strongest payviders in the world who does a great job of knowing their members and does a great job of primary care and preventative care and benefits. Even still, like when and if I develop congestive heart failure, I'm going to go see a cardiologist, and it might be at like UCSF. And guess who's going to pay for it? My payer, who has been treating me well and has been, I've had a long-standing treatment relationship with them. But like at some point, they're just going to be my risk-bearing entity. They can't do it all. And so, yeah, I think there needs to be like, okay, we understand that there's a Venn diagram, but that doesn't mean payers and providers can become the same thing without any sort of barrier between what they're doing.
So that linkage leads to question 6, right? Which is, what is Epic's definition of healthcare operations? So we talked about what treatment is. What's operations? And I'm just going to say what they said, and you guys can muse on it. But they both pointed to the HIPAA operations definition, unsurprisingly. and Particle's just like, this is what operations is. Next question. Epic said, this is what operations is, which is inclusive of things like, quality reviews for HEDIS, clinical guidelines for conditions like diabetes, patient safety activities, fraud detection. They went a little further to talk about what goes into operations. I think to sort of say, like, these are administrative. These are not direct patient care, and Epic Payer Platform is built for that, for those administrative and quality functions, not for treatment. So they used it as sort of a launch pad to differentiate. Are you guys convinced by Epic?
What's funny about this case is like, it's basically, the time that I've dedicated to being in interoperability kind of started around when this case originated. It basically describes what I always assumed payment and operations was, which was very validating to my own feelings. So I felt myself very aligned with Epic's definition. That said, I'm the youngest. Well, interoperability experience wise, I'm the youngest one on this call.
This is all a spectrum. Life is complex. At the end, all things come to a confluence and a river runs through it, right? And that river is what separates operations and treatment. I think a patient has to be involved in treatment. They got to be there, or they got to go pick up a med, or they got to start taking the med, or they got to hear their provider tell them something. And yeah, calculating my HEDIS metrics to decide if I can be more compliant next year is operations. It's not treatment. I don't care if it's going to lead to treatment, but I do see a fine thread somewhere through the spectrum separating treatment and operations. And I think that's necessary if we're going to continue to lean on HIPAA, indefinitely as the law of the land with regards to these different types of activities.
This is putting the case aside for a second and going back to like the first article I wrote about this arena. It's just bullshit that we've set one to zero, the price to zero and the cost of exchange to zero, but market rate for another that is 100x more expensive via more manual, less ubiquitous methods. That becomes problematic because people go, well, treatment is a patient in front of me, but what about if a provider is pulling data to review meds and like think about things without a patient being in front of me? What if a patient's being over the video call with me with telehealth? They're not in front of me. What if it's an async review? And so we eroded away from your point of view and what you posited, Pryce, to say, well, if a provider's involved and they're doing some sort of treatment activity, it's treatment. And then people look and they go, well, if Dr. Smith's doing it for UCSF, and then Dr. Smith goes to work for Cigna and does the exact same activities and for pursuing the same outcome, then why should he or she not have the same capabilities and rights? Why do they have to pay a much more expensive experience to go and push towards the same outcome of improving a patient's health? And so population health, in addition to telehealth and asynchronous care, eroded away some of the cleanliness of all these definitions. And now you throw AI bots and shit in the mix, and good luck trying to keep the two definitions separate. And so what's it mean? I think it means that the reality of where we need to go as an industry is finding a way to bring parity and allow operations to be functional and cheap so that we don't have to have this weird arbitrage, the arbitrage ability of artificially setting the price to zero and allowing market rates and a shittier experience to be prevalent for the other side of the coin is the problem.
We all might agree that the definition doesn't really matter, except that right now the goods are priced at extraordinarily different rates. But if it was all just data, we would be like, yeah, as long as they've got an MPI or they're a covered entity, who cares? Is that your assertion there, Brendan?
That's why it's so important for us to find a way to ubiquity and similar price points where there's always be an arbitrage opportunity and people will abuse the networks, period. That's incentives. People will follow them.
Do incentives lead to fraud and abuse? Sure, we don't need to argue that here. I think we're in agreement. I'm just imagining two different, an HOV lane versus a regular lane. If we've all decided that an HOV lane must meet X requirements and there's a single person driving in it, they get a ticket. There's not a world in which we suddenly just make payment and operations free or start charging for treatment. I feel like the definitions that came out of this exercise were very clear to me in a way that that's the spirit of the law as I've always understood it. And yeah, it would be great if we had, I don't know, the ability to say this is operations and I'll pay, I'm paying into a Stripe account or something.
It took us down a rabbit hole that is distinct from the case. And you're right. This is such a clean case, clean brief. And I'm like, well, this is the way things should be. My end of the side quest here is the rules can change. We can make up whatever freaking rules we want in this life, in this world. And we just have to go and see it through. And that, to me, we're going to have a million of these cases because we already do. Since this case started, there's been
keeping Brendan busy.
The new rule is that your insurance plan is going to incentivize you to connect to an IAS network and upload your information to them and just call it a day.
is this sponsored by Buchwald? Like, what do we do? Like, but anyway, moving on to question 7. Can Epic Payer Platform and Signal be used by different types of customers in different ways?
I think they have different types of customers. So yes.
I'm far from a lawyer, so if anyone who really understands this case is listening, they'd probably think I'm an idiot. But a question like this to me is just like, so it's like, what is Particle going to say to that? Of course they're different. Of course they serve different things. What is it, a Family Guy meme or something where like all of the animals on the ark make a new animal that's like got the trunk of an elephant and the body of a giraffe, and like that's what these tools are. They're just functions patched together. Somebody decides to write a line of code, and then it could be combined with a million different permutations. And I'm just, there's no way that Particle can say these are the same products serving the same types of clients. But what did they say?
Yeah, maybe this is to the crux of it. We're circling back to the beginning where I'm like, the whole point is there's gonna be disagreement. They're not gonna agree about things, and like this makes or breaks the case for them, right? Like Particle says, yes, we both offer similar retrieval and storage and analytics functions. Any differences are just implementation differences. HIPAA purpose of use doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter for the antitrust market. Epic, as you may expect, says, we have payer customers, we have provider users. The Epic Payer Platform is segmented out to each of those. Signal is only used by payers querying one way over care quality for treatment purpose of use, whereas Epic Payer Platform doesn't run over those rails. It doesn't use care quality or other network exchanges. It can't even retrieve from Oracle and Athena, which Signal can, right? All I'd say is Epic says they're different.
I think there's some merit in Particle's response here, which, like you said, was both products provide a range of similar functionality for entities engaged in value-based care. There are differences at the margin, but they serve core retrieval, storage, and analytics functions that support VBC. I'm like, that's a great answer. It also suggests that maybe you two aren't the only ones doing this. It's not a high bar. Like, there's not a difficult, what is it called when you enter a market or whatever?
Barrier to entry.
If you're explaining it this simply, how could you possibly assert that you were the only two doing this? So that's my take.
That's the problem. And it's, again, going back to earlier, it's like they're stuck between being like, no, these are the same market, and like we're serving the same types of customers, and then also being like, no, but like the Innovators of the world, the Arcadias of the world, anyone else that's doing sort of HCC coding and providing data, like those are different. And that's tough. It's just a tough look that is the reason we had this wonky phase 1 and this weird take-home test. They're trying to thread the needle here. Okay, we got a few minutes left, so let's try and get through the remaining questions. Can a Payvider request records for treatment purposes through Epic Payer Platform or Signal?
I don't know the answer to this. This is, this depends on their software.
Didn't they both say yes?
Particle says yes to both, right?
Oh, right.
Signal is for treatment.
Yeah.
Care quality says it's permissible, is what they put into their response. Epic might say that they're only payment operations, but we have proof via discovery and their litigation position that it's they're doing treatment as well, is what Particle says. A lot of this is redacted, so I don't think that we actually see the proof, from all the spicy stuff, unfortunately, is blocked. But Epic says no for Epic Payer Platform. They say you gotta be a payer, you gotta be doing it for operations and payment. It's gonna be minimum necessary, whereas Signal is treatment. And this in question 7 are the critical ones, or could be the critical ones for market definition. Okay.
Yeah.
Is HIPAA purpose of use a defining characteristic of a product market? Like, if we're saying, is to say whether they're serving the same market, if we take Epic's answer as correct, right, that Epic only pulls for operations and payment, Particle only pulls for treatment, does that mean by default they're separate markets?
No. Jackhammer, break things. Hammer, break things. Backhoe, break things. Like,
this is the market distortion based on fees. This is Brendan's can of worms, and I think we should just call it Brendan's can of worms as like going forward in industry definition.
Correct. It's not. Both of them say no. Particle says very clearly, nope. Interchangeability. Jackhammer, the break things test.
Like,
The break things test. I hope this not referencing cases. The Pryce Ancona break things test is a true antitrust test. It's interchangeability, reasonable interchangeability of tools and of products, and they don't care how they get, but they get data and they can do things with it. And they hand wave at secondary use and all this stuff. So I don't think we really need to get into. Epic says no, but if you actually look at the purposes of the use, the distinctions, you can understand that they're not reasonably interchangeable because you're getting records from just Epic providers because you're serving, sort of different client bases. So like if a payer using Epic can't switch or vice versa, like a treating provider can't switch and use Epic Payer Platform, then they're not substitutes. And so this actually gets to where they denied Innovaser, right? Particle says Innovaser is not a relevant competitor because it doesn't query national interoperability networks to retrieve new clinical records across unaffiliated providers. Well, if that's true,
Neither does
Epic
EPP.
says, neither does EPP, and that's a really compelling argument, right? To utilize Particle's own words against them.
Or as the redacted content may say, Particle knows that that's not a true assertion.
Yeah, I mean, suffice to say, like I think Particle has some killer lines in theirs, similarly using Epic's words against them. It's just unfortunately redacted, whereas this part is not. Question 10 to close it out. Under what circumstances? Yeah, extra credit. Under what circumstances can Epic Payer Platform be used for treatment-related purposes?
Brendan, you sort of disagreed with this earlier, but I don't think it can.
The fact that they highlight care quality rulings in their response here, that like business associates can make that request. Isn't that similar to what Particle was saying above as to why they think that these are similar offerings?
Yeah, I mean that is. I think you're right to call that out. Or that Particle multiple times references the decision making of care quality, and that being said, this is the same question as the one above it. It's Epic says we don't do treatment requests. It can't be used for treatment, and so I think Particle uses this as a method to talk about the way that they legally pull data, the proof there of doing so prior. Epic just answers it point blank and says, we're not. All right, well, that's all 10. Do we want to grade the test? How do we think each party did?
I couldn't even keep track. This feels more like the Honorable Naomi Buchwald has become the first ever philosopher of treatment and operations than some sort of mathematically true or false test to be graded. But I would say maybe my take would just be this: these are really, really interesting questions, and I like that the way they were phrased is sort of to peel away like what is a very fine film here that connects these use cases and products. But I think the answers on both sides, in my opinion, sort of scream like it's not a small market. It's not a single thing job to be done. It's not based on how you do things, or it is very much like what you're doing and when you're doing it. Epic, I think, has receipts to show like we've been down the straight and narrow path with regards to not using this network for this purpose, and we serve payers and providers very distinctly. I think it gives Epic the upper hand, but maybe not to not move to discovery. I just think reading this, you have to imagine like we're splitting hairs here in a way that's unnecessary and perhaps indicative that a antitrust case is not in the cards.
I found myself very quickly, like just in skimming these and disagreeing with the article's definition of payvider, and it really skewed my reading of the rest of the responses. I found what Epic was writing around market definition to be far more compelling, and so the rest of their answers, I think I gave them a lot more credit, but I'm going to be very interested to see what the decision around discovery is, because there are some redacted portions. Maybe there's some absolute bangers in there, and we'll find out about it. But I just thought that the definition of payvider on Particle side was particularly weak.
What people are going to want to know, what does the health API guy think?
What we think is right or wrong about these topics, as you heard me like digress and go off on a side quest, is totally distinct from antitrust law. And we're not lawyers, but I really like antitrust law. And the bar is really high for it. And market definition has always been the challenge. And this weird take-home exam and phase one, all is because Judge Buchwald has been skeptical of the product market. And that's not good for particle. And reading these responses, I don't see it getting better. So like my guess about the way the case goes is that she allows for summary judgment against the antitrust claim, and at least Epic gets a shot via that to dismiss that count. There is one remaining claim, and Particle makes a strong, compelling case for prejudice if that was to be dismissed, of this tortious interference on their contracts with one of their clients, which is a separate claim that's really not part of this whole phase one. And so I imagine maybe a motion for summary judgment being allowed, and then progressing to a discovery that's focused around that claim, which is lower damages and like just isn't the big cut that I think Quinn Emanuel and Particle were hoping to get. But we shall see. We shall see.
Stay tuned. Maybe it'll go to
Gentlemen.
game 7.
Nixon 4.
Spurs, let's go Spurs.
Go baby. We're down, but we're not out, and we're very optimistic. So
Big game tonight, Pryce.
We love an underdog in both this court case
love it.
and the Spurs. So see you all next time.
Thanks all.
See you guys.